My guest today, super special. She is a communicator known as a media personality, but they will be surprised that media was not her initial degree. She wasn't pursuing journalism, it just bumped into her way, and how she took advantage of that career. We share the story of great mentorship and how you can use also storytelling as part of effective communication. I don't want to spoil it for you, so without further ado, let's get started. And with that, let's welcome my guest speaker, Doreen Biira.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the invitation to your great show that I believe is very impactful to your audiences. It's such an honor to be on the show today.
You're welcome. Maybe as just we start, I would like to know from you, like you can give us in a nutshell, what was your career journey?
Thank you. So for many people who know me today, know me as a communicator, probably a media personality. But what people don't know is that I actually didn't go to journalism school. I was trained into the job. And I went to uni and studied Bachelor of Science, Information Technology. And I think in my second year, that's when I got an opportunity to work on TV as I was studying information technology. So I was trained into the job. And many years later, here I am identifying as a media personality with a bias to business journalism. And also, I am a communicator who is currently the creatives director for Africa Speaks Limited.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because we mainly know you from your journalism route, mainly see you on TV. And it's great to know that it was just like a path that found you as you were doing your main bachelor's degree. Yeah,
I think about 16, that's when I really started to find my passion. You know, they keep saying, you can always find your passion no matter what age, blah, blah, blah. But I believe that when you are young enough to understand where your interests are, maybe guided by mentors, and mentors can be your parents, can be the people you look up to, your role models, or whoever. If they're able to identify your strong points or your passion points and bring them out, it doesn't matter how young you are. I think that is where that's a good place to start building a career. So if you have a child who is 16 years old and there's something that you see in them that you think they can actually grow up to become, it's a good place to start. Yeah,
I totally agree with you. I think mentors play a very big part in helping us find who we are and what we are really good at. So currently you identify as a communication specialist or strategist. Yeah, so what does that involve?
So strategic communication is just helping people to bring out their vision, helping them to understand that there's a role that we play in bringing out the visibility of an organization or a company, helping them to identify what strategies would best work for their organizations. I'd say today, if there's an organization that does not have a communication strategist, then there's something missing in that organization. So a communication strategist is basically a professional who helps organizations develop and implement effective communication strategies, simply put. And this can include communication strategies, content creation, advisories on corporate communication, and also identifying possible partners to work with, liaison, and many others that do encompass the roles or the duties of a communication strategist.
Oh, that is interesting. So even the social media part is part of the communication. Thinking about advertising, is also advertising under communication?
Well, you could say that, but that is for people who have specialized in communicating using advertising or advertisements. That is also a subsector of strategic communication, because either way, whatever you're advertising needs to communicate to the end user. And so, yes, you could say advertising is also a part of communication.
Ah, good. And when you look back in terms of your career and what you have been able to do, what would you say you're really proud of?
Impact, Daniel, impact. If you're not able to impact anyone's life, I don't think you're doing anything right. Impact is about making people feel that what you do is associating with them, but also at the same time is making them feel like they are more aware than they were before. Impact is also about how much change you're able to cause in society, in a community, in a nation. It doesn't matter how, if it's even just one person whose life you're able to impact, that one person is good enough. If it's 1,000, well, very good. If it's 1,000,000 people, even better. But impact for me is what I think that my career has always been about.
Okay. And any particular instance of, like, say, this impact you're able to have either to a person, to a community, or even to the nation, as an example?
Right. So, as a journalist, one of our biggest roles is to inform, and to inform so the public is fully aware of what their rights are, fully aware of who they are as a people, and also fully aware of the things that they do not know as a society. So, if I'm going to look back into my career, which I would say is probably just in its early stages, or do I say mid stages? Because I've been doing this for maybe about for 12 years, over 12 years, let me put it that way, since 2008. So that's pretty much about, is it 13, 14, 15 years maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, and throughout, I could say that everything I have put my mind to, I have passionately done with the sole goal of having the audience in mind. What does the audience need? Who are they? How would they feel about this kind of story that I would do? How would they feel about the information that I would relay to them? Would they be impacted by it positively or negatively? So you have to think about all of those things. But if I'm going to be specific, I'd say in my career, I have tried to make sure that my job is also part of the society. So I remember in my early days, we started a campaign called 31 million Ugandans, 31 million trees. And it was about helping people plant trees after a certain part of Uganda had been affected by floods and mudslides. So we started a campaign to help people be aware of what it means when they deforest, or when there's deforestation in the country, and what it means to plant trees and have that sort of impact. So this campaign happened to get the attention of the head of state at the time. And in some way, we believe that we managed to create impact across the country with this campaign. And the other part, I think, would have to be the stories that I've done as a business journalist. And
Yeah.
one of them happens to be a story about this young entrepreneur or social entrepreneur who started a campaign called Adopt a Family in Kibera. And he started this campaign to help feed the poor, or feed people who could not afford to provide food for themselves and their own economic development. And this was during the pandemic. So if you've heard about Adopt a Family during the lockdown, you possibly would understand the story. So this gentleman was helping to fundraise money from different people or well-wishers across Kenya, and helping the people in Kibera as well put food on the table. So people were sending money through an M-Pesa number, and through this M-Pesa fundraising, he was able to buy weekly meals for these families. So telling this story created so much impact that gave this gentleman recognition also by the nation, by the president during the pandemic, which was a really beautiful thing to see, that the stories we tell do have impact and can go global, can go national. And these are stories that sometimes we take for granted, but are stories that the world needs to know about.
That is quite impactful. I think, yeah, as you say, the stories you share have a much bigger impact. Rather, even sometimes the ones that you don't know, maybe you just did a story and you might not you might not get that feedback, or someone comes and tell you that this one actually did this for me. But that is quite great. Now, I want us to switch gears a little bit now to a personal level. I know we talked about communication, being a communication strategist for an organization, but I also think communication is quite important at a personal level. How would you describe effective communication if someone was to communicate or to try to get to be an effective communicator? How would you describe?
That's a good question. So, effective communication really begins with mutual respect. For instance, when we started having a conversation about you having me on the show, I had to think through, when am I going to be available? What kind of conversation are we going to have? When would you want to have this conversation? What time should we have this conversation? And it was a situation of mutual respect. I will be available on this date, and here are the questions that you sent me. So then I was able to commit. By committing, it actually means you're respecting someone's request, and that is effective communication. Had we come to today and I had said, yes, I'll be available, yes, I'll make time, and then the time comes and then I go blank, what would be your reaction? Your reaction would be, I don't think I can take this person seriously going forward. So effective communication really is about mutual respect, and also having a good work culture, having interpersonal skills that would help you advance in your career. And there's so many things that I think we need to consider when we are talking about effective communication. You cannot be an effective communicator if, one, you lack active listening skills. If somebody talks to you and you're not really listening, you would probably be the least respected person in a room, because one, you listen because you are internalizing what someone is saying. You want to respond after understanding, not responding from hearing. Hearing is different from listening. I can hear that your name is Daniel, but then I would not know what your second name is. I would not know that you are a coach, but I would know that, oh, that guy called Daniel, But when I take time to listen, I would know Daniel is a coach. This is what he does. He speaks to experts who have tips to pass on to other people, and, learning lessons. So because I've listened to what you've been telling me, then I'm able to know who exactly you are. So active listening is really important. And it's also important as an effective communicator to be assertive. When you're assertive, or being assertive is just pretty much the ability to state your opinion. You cannot always be a yes person. In every situation, when you're asked your opinion about something, and maybe someone else has put out a different opinion, you just go with the flow and say, hey, I think, that person is right, or Joy is right. Joy cannot always be right. You have to stand for something. And that is one of the unique identifiers of a communicator. A communicator is the person who says, boss, I don't think you're right when you say that your target market are only the CEOs. What about the people at the bottom of the table? What are you thinking about them? So a communicator is that person who really half the time folds up their sleeves and tells it as it is. And then goes ahead to implement what they have come up with as an idea to help their boss or whoever it is they're communicating for understand that there's two sides to the coin. The other thing I think is a good communicator tells stories. If you're able to tell stories even in a minute, I think that would really be amazing as a communicator, because facts, figures, and piles of data, those are things that anyone can do, and they can do them in a PowerPoint presentation. They can do them when they're talking at an event. But how much more interesting would it sound if I came and I said, listen to me. The reason why we are having the high levels of teenage pregnancies is because there's one girl in Mombasa who dropped out of school at the age of 14 because her parents could not afford to take her to school. And because of that, we couldn't take care of her at home either. So what other option did they have? they married her off into a family that they owed money, and through that she was able to square out the date. So then now it gives the perspective of, so teenage pregnancy is actually this bad. Premature marriages are this bad. This is the effect they have on a family. So people start to think about all the other things that might come with it. You could probably sum this up as Aisha Juma's story that has been trending, the past couple of days. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, um, telling stories can come in different forms. But if you decide to say, listen, there are
Yeah.
1 million girls who got pregnant during the pandemic, yes, it will tell the story. But how deeper would it tell the story? So now, after I've relayed this information about this girl from the
Mhm.
coast who got pregnant or dropped out of school, got pregnant after being married off, then now
Mhm.
you bring in the figures and say, girl, this girl called Joy is one of a million pregnancies that happen every year in the coastal part of this country. Then now the story starts to make sense. So storytelling
Mhm.
should be the DNA of a communicator, because without it, if you have it, you want to persuade people to something, to tell them a story about how someone overcame a certain situation. So, also writing down your thoughts as a communicator, some of the things that you really need to keep in mind. But above all, what
Yeah.
kind of impact are you having with your communication? Impact is really the core of communication. A good communicator should be able to create impact, or at least get people talking.
Yeah, that is quite informative. I like the fact that you said, yeah, part of communicating is not just about talking, it's about listening. And
Yeah,
differentiated listening and hearing, two different things. And the storytelling
absolutely.
bit, I'm sure most people will be able to remember the story you have told us of the girl in Mombasa getting married off more. They will be able to remember that much quicker than maybe any other thing that you have said. And I really like that bit of storytelling. I think, is it last week I took an online course on LinkedIn about
Hmm.
using stories for selling, and it was quite impactful. I think storytelling can cut across anything, may it be sales, may it be even doing a presentation about something that might be very boring, or business
Yeah.
present with facts and figures. Stories can play a very big part.
Hmm.
Yeah. So just to move on, if someone now they have learned this is what effective communication is, how would you say effective communication can help someone to progress in their career?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say, if I
Mhm.
could pose a question to you, Daniel, what
Right.
do you think are some of the things that have helped you get to where you are, without really channeling them specifically to communication? What are some of those aspects that have helped get you to where you are today?
I would say the one, being consistent, knowing that I have a message to pass, and trying always to ensure that I stay consistent, like showing up every now and then. And at the same
Hmm.
time, learning from my own mistakes, knowing this one works, this one doesn't, doubling down on what works. And generally, I would pick those.
Right. So thanks a lot for that. So I would say it's the same thing with communicating professionals.
Mhm.
If you are a communicating professional, you have to have both hard skills and soft skills. One,
Mhm.
you have to do an assessment of what are the required skills for a communication expert or a communication strategist. If
Mhm.
it's about maybe editing skills, you need to find out, how are my editing skills today? What do I need to improve about them? Who are the best communication strategists in the industry today? What can I learn from them? Those are some of the things you need to consider.
Right.
If there's a hard skill that you need, maybe it's Final Cut Pro, or it's, I don't know, which are the other editing software
So
that
it's
we have
Premiere,
today?
Premiere Pro,
Adobe,
this Adobe.
and
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many that you
Mhm.
can actually download or learn about. If you don't know them, find out from other people who are in your industry.
Mhm.
Get to know how these things work. If it's about social media and which are the social media platforms that you need to be on. I mean, get on them and find out what impact you're able to have, what information you can source. So I would say one of the things that has really helped me throughout my career, that I would pass on to other people for effective communication. One, um, get to know the hard skills and the soft skills. So we've talked about the hard skills, the kind of technologies you need to know, or editing software and things like that.
Yeah.
But then also there's the soft skills. Are you a good communicator verbally? We're not talking about the writing and everything. We're talking about
Yeah.
verbal communication. Are
Right.
you a good speaker? Are you able to explain yourself in detail without really struggling to express yourself? Those are some of the soft skills that you need to have. What are your interpersonal skills? How do you relate with other people, or how you relate with other people is able to determine whether or not you're going to succeed in your career. Two, I think that you need to build networks.
Right.
Without networks, I don't think you can communicate. And by building networks, this is what I mean. Let's say you've been given a role as a communicator, and your job is to reach out to as many people for an organization as possible. The first thing you're going to do is look through maybe your phone contacts, or go through your database if you have one. I have one. I have a database of like people in the business world. I have a database for people in the science world, a database for people in climate action, a database for pretty much everyone, the energy and renewable energy experts.
Right.
I have like a whole pool of them. And I know at least one person in these different sectors personally. It could be politicians, it could be business professionals, CEOs, whoever they are. I know at least one of them personally. I know that I can call one person and say, Daniel, I know that you're really good at coaching, and I would like for you to come and speak to my organization, or at least the team at my organization, about business coaching. So, of course, maybe the people in the company have been searching for a good coach and they failed to find one. But when they
Right.
hire me as a communication profession or professional, one of my job or part of my job is to make sure that I know people in every sector. So, how easily you can get a hold of someone in your pool of networks is a very important skill that you need to have as a communicator. Three, you need to have a thick skin as a communicator. When someone disagrees with your opinion, how easily can you take it as positive criticism or negative criticism? In corporate communication, especially, you will find people who will half the time disagree with pretty much everything that you do or everything that you say. So, how you're able to convince them that there's the other side of the story is very key, because it's so easy for you to lose it and just say, you know what, I'm quitting this job, let me look for something else to do. So
Right.
you need to be able to take in criticism positively and negatively, but also have a thick skin, because if you don't have a thick skin,
Yeah.
communication can be tough for you. The fifth thing, or maybe the fourth thing I would say, is as a good communicator, you should be able to listen to both sides of the story before you make a decision.
Uh-huh.
A decision about an employee, a decision about maybe a project that you want to do. You should be able to also assess whether or not it's something that you're going to have to defend after it has been passed on to the public. If you're not able to defend your own decisions, if you're not able to defend a project, how it comes in, then you need to think twice about what you're communicating. Even when you know you're communicating something that maybe is anti society, you need to have that defense point that you will stand by in the event that you're going to meet any sort of resistance. So it's very critical for you to stand by what you're standing by and defend it, be able to defend it when the time. I also think that the other part that many communication professionals do, they read extensively. They go back to school, they upgrade their skills. So if you're able to do that, please go ahead and do it. Upgrade your skills, go back to school, read extensively, travel the world, and get to know how different industries work. The
Yeah.
communication industry in Kenya is different from the communication industry, say, in Rwanda, in South Africa, in Egypt, in the United Kingdom. We all function differently, and getting to understand how these different spaces work helps you to come back now and see how else you can compete at a global scale locally. Like bringing that global mindset into a local execution of your role is very key. And also vice versa. Get to know how differently the global market works and how the local market works. Sometimes what works globally doesn't really work for the local market. So knowing when to pull out what cards to play is very important for communicators, and many other tips that I could share, but those are just the main ones that I can think of right now.
Very interesting. You talked about reading widely, and
Yeah.
yeah, you can go back to school or you can still read books. So the next question is about books. Yeah, maybe you
Yeah,
can share. I'm sure you also read books. What
I
book
do.
have you read, or maybe recently, or even in the past, that have has had a big impact for in your life and even in communication in general?
So I tell you what, Danielle, when I was like, I think 20 years old,
Uh huh.
20, yeah, I had just started my TV career. And I remember my employer
Yes.
calling me up because at that time I never took my job as seriously as I did maybe 9 months into it or a year into it. At the beginning, I felt like I was just doing it because I needed something to keep me busy as I get through university.
Uh
But
huh.
then one day he sat me down and said, "Listen, you actually have a skill that no one has. You have a talent that no one else has. You're not the best. We didn't pick you because you are the best of them all, but we picked you out because you have a skill and a talent that is so hard to find with the other people that we're looking for to do this job." So he gave me like a different number of things to do. He challenged me and told me, "I want you every day to read at least 10 pages of a book." And he even gave me a book and said, "Here, take this book and see what it does for you." So he gave me this book. I don't know if you're able to see it.
Yeah, I can see it. Even I can. Or
Grandson, it's Screw It, Let's Do It. Lessons in life and business. And it still is one of my favorite books because this book is about Richard Branson. I'm sure we all know who Richard Branson is. If we don't, please go and Google him.
yeah.
He's one of the biggest business people we have in the world today. He's the owner of Virgin Atlantic and many other businesses. He owns some businesses here in Kenya as well. So go read about him. So this tiny little book, Daniel, when I read it, it talks about this young teenager who didn't complete college. He didn't finish school. So at the age of 16, I think he started selling newspapers. And then he said, "But if I'm selling these newspapers, why can't I make one? Why can't I produce one?" So he started that a very long time ago. And if you read about like the different chapters, it has both personal and business skills. He talks about being bold. He talks about being assertive. He talks about really never taking some things too seriously. If one thing fails, you can always try another thing, never
Yeah.
giving up, challenging yourself, and standing on your feet, living in the moment, valuing your family and friends, and also, having respect, being innovative, being thinking young, but also being able to go out there and do as many things as you can while you still have the energy to do them. So this is one of my favorite books, and I read it back then, and it still has an impact on some of the decisions that I make. Because
Huh?
being bold in a society or in an industry like communication is very key. And I have learned through his book that being bold is one of the things that you need to get along in life anyway. if you're not bold with your life, with your decisions, then somewhere, somehow, you don't even have to look at it from a business perspective, even just from a personal perspective. If you're not bold with your life, I mean, it's just going to hang in the balance. You'll always be going with the wind. The wind blows you to the left, you go to the left, it blows you to the right. The same way you go, it blows you backwards. You might never come back. So, yeah, that's one of the books. And then there's the other book that I don't know if you've read this book. Have you read this book?
Yes, I've read that.
Power,
Power by
right?
Michael
Power
Robert
is
Greene.
the 48 Laws of Power. 48 Laws of Power is a really, really great book that I would recommend to anyone, really, who, no matter the age. If you've never read it, it's a great book. It talks about never outshining your master, but it also really talks about the things that you need to know about life. The power of attraction, the power of making decisions boldly. It talks about so many things. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. I mean, it really just empowers you with a different mindset, for lack of a better way to put it, because we are all brought up differently. Some of us are brought up in such a way that we never ever see the negative side of life. By negative side of life, I mean that we always think everyone will always be good to us, but we forget that there are people who actually are brought up to make sure they make others fail. So reading books gives you a different mindset on life and how different people deal with life challenges. It talks about, being never outshining the master. Like I said, it also talks about winning through your actions, never through argument. It sort of makes you into this sophisticated person, yet simply putting it that way. So you're simple, but you're sophisticated. So I really love to read books that have an impact on my life, like that get me out of my mindset and put me in a different mindset. The other book that I got, I think last year, is this book by my former HR manager at the Standard Group when I worked at KTN. This is a book called Owning Your Career by Pauline Kirathe. Owning Your Career by Pauline Kirathe. Yeah, she published this book, I think, in 2020 or 2021, around there. And it's a great book. If you would like to get into the mind of a human resource professional, this is the book that I would recommend for you to read, because it helps a lot with knowing what kind of skills you need to bring forward when you're applying for a job, when you're switching jobs, what are the things you need to know about, and also understanding yourself and your career. It talks about the skills to build a resilient career, the habits of building your career intentionally, but also it talks about when is it time to move on. So you've been doing this job and you're tired of it. When is it time for you to say, okay, enough, I'm moving on to the next thing? Or when is it time to actually start something of your own? Because sometimes we always tend to think that employment is the answer to everything. But have you thought that you probably have ideas that could make your employer your employee, and vice versa? And vice versa. So, I mean, reading books for me is something that I love because it makes me more knowledgeable. It gives me wisdom to deal with life's shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think the book for Robert Greene I've read is Mastery.
Robert Greene, right? Yeah. And he has another one, by the way, on execution. If you haven't read it, you should try reading it as well.
I'll definitely do.
Yeah.
So I find the reading, he's kind of writing a bit. Is it very academic or very complicated of some type?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, when you put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like one way. He has a way of doing things that is a bit maybe conservative, but at the same time, we have a half of this world that is conservative, that actually controls the world. If you look at all the wealthy people in this world, there's a big percentage of them who are very conservative. So to be able to deal with them, you need some of these skills.
Super. Thank you very much. I think we are coming now to the tail end. How can people get in touch with you? if they want, maybe they have had this conversation quite good, they want probably to get in touch with you, even to give you business in terms of communication strategy or in any other way, how would you be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Right. So let me say, and I said it at the beginning when we had just started, I am the communications director, or rather creatives director for Africa Speaks Limited, which is a strategic communications firm that works to transform communication and liaison for businesses and organizations across Africa and beyond. And we work with partner clients to strategically grow their visibility, impact in their respective fields and target markets. So, besides that, I'm a media personality and I have different platforms that I'm on. On Facebook, you can find me there, official Joy Doreen Biira. On Instagram, Joy Doreen Biira. On Twitter, Joy Doreen Biira. LinkedIn, the same. And which is the other one? Is there any other? Is there any other platform I've left out? Possibly YouTube, Biira Online. To get there.
Okay.
I am on TikTok, but
good.
TikTok. I'm also still trying to understand how I can tap into that market of TikTok. But yeah, I am on TikTok as well. How do you get in touch with me? That's on those platforms. You can get in touch with me. I also do moderate events. I moderate a show also called EdTech Monday. That is a MasterCard Foundation series of conversations about education technology and how we can leverage education technology and transform the education systems across Africa. That's a show that airs on CNBC Africa, but it also has country editions, but are hosted by different personalities. So that, among other things that I do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.